The next time Sarah and I were together, we were at her apartment in the south end of Concord, a second-floor flat in a tenement building on Purley Street. I'd stayed away from Osgood's for several weeks, deliberately trying to avoid running into Sarah there, though I never quite put it that way to myself. I found excuses and generated interest in and reasons for going elsewhere after work. Yet I did meet her, inadvertently, of course. After picking up shirts at the cleaners on South Main and Purley Streets, I'd gone down Purley on my way to South State and the post office. It was a Saturday morning, and this trip on my bicycle was part of my regular Saturday routine. I did not remember that Sarah lived on Purley Street, although she had told me several times in a complaining way. It's a rough neighborhood, packed dirt yards, shabby apartment buildings, the carcasses of old half-stripped cars on cinder blocks in the driveways, broken red and yellow plastic tricycles in the cracked sidewalks. But as soon as I saw her, I remembered. It was too late to avoid meeting her. I was riding my bike, wearing shorts and T-shirt, the package containing my folded and starched shirts hooked onto the carrier behind me, and she was walking toward me along the sidewalk, lugging 2 large bags of groceries. She saw me, and I stopped. We talked, and I offered to carry her groceries for her. I took the bags while she led the bike, handling it carefully, as if she were afraid she might break it. At the stoop, we came to a halt. She leaned the bike against the banister and reached for her groceries. "I'll carry them up for you," I said. I directed her to loop the chain lock from the bike to the banister rail and snap it shut, and told her to bring my shirts up with her. "Maybe you'd like a beer?" she said as she opened the door to the darkened hallway. Narrow stairs disappeared in front of me into heavy, damp darkness, and the air smelled like old newspapers. "Sure," I said, and followed her up. "Sorry there's no light. I can't get them to fix it." "No matter, I can follow along," I said. And even in the dim light of the hall, I could see the large blue veins that cascaded thickly down the backs of her legs. She wore tight, white duck Bermuda shorts, rubber shower sandals, and a pink sleeveless sweater. I pictured her in the cashier's line at the supermarket. I would have been behind her, a stranger, and on seeing her I would have turned away and studied the covers of the magazines, TV Guide, People, the National Enquirer. Yet here I was inviting myself into her home, eagerly staring at the backs of her ravaged legs, her sad, tasteless clothing, her poverty. Picture this. The man enters the apartment behind the woman. She waves him toward the table in the kitchen, where he sets down the bags and looks good-naturedly around the room. "What about the beer you bribed me with?" he asks. The apartment is cluttered with old, oversized furniture, yard sale and second-hand stuff, neat and arranged in a more or less orderly way, however, and the man seems comfortable there. He strolls from the kitchen to the living room and peeks into the 3 small bedrooms that branch off a hallway behind the living room. "Nice place," he calls to the woman. He studies the framed pictures of her 3 children arranged as if on an altar atop the buffet. "Nice-looking kids," he calls out. When he returns to the kitchen, the woman is putting away her groceries, her back to him. "You sure are quiet today, Sarah," he says in a low voice. "Everything okay?" Silently, she turns away from the grocery bags, crosses the room to the man, reaches up to him, and holding him by the head, kisses his mouth, rolls her torso against his, drops her hands to his hips and yanks him tightly to her, and goes on kissing him, eyes closed, working her face furiously against his. The man places his hands on her shoulders and pulls away, and they face each other, wide-eyed, amazed, and frightened. The man drops his hands, and the woman lets go of his hips. Then, after a few seconds, the man silently turns, goes to the door, and leaves. Sarah appeared at my apartment door the following morning, a Sunday, cool and rainy. She had brought me the package of freshly laundered shirts I'd left in her kitchen, and when I opened the door to her, she simply held the package out to me as if it were a penitent's gift. She wore a yellow rain slicker and cap, and looked more like a disconsolate schoolgirl facing an angry teacher than a grown woman dropping a package off at a friend's apartment. I invited her inside, and she accepted my invitation. I had been reading the Sunday New York Times on the couch and drinking coffee, lounging through the gray morning in bathrobe and pajamas. I told her to take off her wet raincoat and hat and hang them in the closet by the door, and started for the kitchen to get her a cup of coffee when I stopped, turned, and looked at her. She closed the closet door in her yellow raincoat and hat, turned around, and faced me. What else can I do? I must describe it. I remember that moment of 10 years ago as if it occurred 10 minutes ago. The package of shirts on the table behind her, the newspapers scattered over the couch and floor, the sound of wind-blown rain washing the side of the building outside, and the silence of the room as we stood across from one another and watched, while we each simultaneously removed our own clothing. My robe, her blouse and skirt, my pajama top, her slip and bra, my pajama bottom, her underpants, until we were both standing naked in the harsh gray light, two naked members of the same species, a male and a female, the male somewhat younger and less scarred than the female somewhat less delicately constructed than the male, both individuals pale skinned with dark thatches of hair in the areas of their genitals, both individuals standing slackly, as if a great protracted tension between them had at last been released. We made love that morning in my bed for long hours that drifted easily into afternoon, and we talked, as people usually do when they spend half a day or half a night in bed together. During the next few weeks we met and made love often and always at my apartment. On arriving home from work I would phone her, or if not she would phone me, and after a few feints and dodges one would suggest to the other that we get together tonight, and a half-hour later she'd be at my door. Our love-making was passionate, skillful, kindly, and deeply satisfying. Then one hot night, a Saturday in August, we were lying in bed atop the tangled sheets, smoking cigarettes and chatting idly, and Sarah suggested that we go out for a drink. Out now? Sure, it's early. What time is it? I scanned the digital clock next to the bed. 9:49. There, see? That's not so early. You usually go home by 11, you know. It's almost 10. No, it's only a little after 9. Depends on how you look at things. Besides, Ron, it's Saturday night. Or is this the only thing you know how to do? She said, and poked me in the ribs. You know how to dance? You like to dance? Yeah, sure, but not tonight. It's too hot, and I'm tired. But she persisted, happily pointing out that an air-conditioned bar would be as cool as my apartment, and we didn't have to go to a dance bar. We could go to Osgood's. As a compromise, she said. I suggested a place called the El Rancho, a restaurant with a large, dark cocktail lounge and dance bar located several miles from town on the old Portsmouth Highway. Around 9, the restaurant closed, and the bar became something of a roadhouse with a small country and western band and a clientele drawn from the 4 or 5 villages that adjoined Concord on the north and east. I had eaten at the restaurant once, but had never gone to the bar, and I didn't know anyone who had. Sarah was silent for a moment. Then she lit a cigarette and drew the sheet over her naked body. You don't want anybody to know about us, Ron, do you? That's not it. I just don't like gossip, and I work with a lot of people who show up sometimes at Osgood's, on a Saturday night especially. No, she said firmly. You're ashamed of being seen with me. You'll sleep with me all right, but you won't go out in public with me. That's not true, Sarah. She was silent again. Relieved, I reached across her to the bed table and got my cigarettes and lighter. You owe me, Ron, she said suddenly as I passed over her. You owe me. I don't know what you're talking about, Sarah. I don't owe you anything. Friendship you owe me, and respect. Friendship and respect. A person can't do what you've done with me without owing them friendship and respect. Sarah, I really don't know what you're talking about, I said. I am your friend, you know that. And I respect you, I do. You really think so, don't you? Yes, of course. She said nothing for several long moments. Then she sighed, and in a low, almost inaudible voice said, "Then you'll have to go out in public with me. I don't care about Osgood's or the people you work with. We don't have to go there or see any of them," she said. "But you're going to have to go to places like the El Rancho with me, and a few other places I know, too, where there's people I know, people I work with, and maybe we'll even go to a couple of parties, because I get invited to parties sometimes, you know. I have friends, and I have some family, too, and you're going to have to meet my family. My kids think I'm just going around bar hopping when I'm over here with you, and I don't like that. So you're going to have to meet them so I can tell them where I am when I'm not at home nights. And sometimes you're going to come over and spend the evening at my place." Her voice had risen as she heard her demands and felt their rightness, until now though she was almost shouting at me. "You owe that to me, or else you're a bad man. It's that simple, Ron." It was.